You can see the safety bulletin board behind. Again, this kind of a demonstration and training exercise is a real emphasis on why the site had the safety record it did have. The orchards were the ones that had already been planted by the early settlers to the Hanford, White Bluffs, and Richland communities prior to condemnation. The people that lived there were farmers and orchardists for the most part, and when the federal government condemned the land, they were forced to leave their homes, their businesses, their orchards, and the farms. Matthias made arrangements with the federal prison industries to bring in federal prisoners from McNeil Island. They lived at Camp Columbia under heavy guard, and then were taken out into the orchards to harvest the fruit, which was then used by the armed forces and other federal agencies. Of a workforce that would total over 51,000 people, about 4,000 people there were, or 9%, were women. Most of them were young and single. Most of them filled the traditional roles of women in the workforce as clerks, stenographers, secretaries, nurses. A few, were lab technicians. There were also a few WACs here, about 16 to 24 WACs at any one time. Less than 1% were managers, supervisors, and lab technicians. There were 8 mess halls. Meals cost 60 cents. Like the men, the women here found the wages to be extremely high. For many of them, it was their first trip away from home. The meals were plentiful. Her working day may have been over at 5:30, but the norm was not a 40-hour work week. It was a 54-plus hour work week. Overtime was more normal than not. The auditorium was built in 2 weeks. It was used to provide a wide variety of entertainment. Big bands, big-name singers, dances, sporting events such as boxing matches, first-run movies, Christmas parties. Local entertainment included a number of beauty pageants. Anything to maintain morale and encourage people to stay on the site. Single women lived in one of a number of dormitories. The dorms were designed by Gus Alden Pearson, a Spokane architect, the same man who designed most of the city of Richland and the Richland businesses. There were 1-person and 2-person rooms, as well as a lounge. And in the women's dormitories, there was also a laundry room. The men's dormitories did not have laundry facilities. A single room rented for about $20 a month in the start. It included heat, linens, maid service, and furnishings. A larger corner room was $250 more. There was always a pot of coffee in an alcove in the mess halls, and men were welcome to fill their thermoses and take them back to the barracks or out onto the site. Over 3 million box lunches were made over the period that they were provided here. And in fact, Matthias quickly established a separate facility and a full complement of crew to do nothing but make box lunches for the men on the site. And while the rest of the United States might have dealt with rationing, sugar coupons, flour coupons, meat coupons, wheatless days, and milkless days, that was never really a problem here at Hanford. Matthias frequently went to the War Production Board in Spokane and argued exactly why they should have 3 times the sugar the War Production Board thought they should have, without any question about why they needed it. Bread was plentiful, meat was plentiful, there was fresh fruit and vegetables, there was always sugar, there was always fresh, real coffee. There were taverns and rec halls. I believe the taverns went through 12,000 kegs of beer a week. Beer was never a problem either. Circuses were another popular entertainment that were brought in to perform in the auditorium. This is at Christmas time, an especially important time for lots of good shows to maintain morale. People were very far away from home, many of them, especially the young women, for the first time. It was sometimes very lonely. The weather was not exactly always. Many people came out here because they had seen pictures of the Pacific Northwest. That is Mount Rainier, the clear flowing streams, the lovely forests of green trees. And when they got out here, and then yes, the Evergreen State, right. As Matthias once said in a masterful statement of understatement, the village area was subject to a rather serious dust storm, which is causing much unhappiness among the village residents. The Women Army Corps, was a small contingent of women that were here. About 16 to 24 of them at any one time. Barracks and mess halls and many of the recreational facilities were not only segregated by race, but they were also segregated by sex. A man could not visit a young lady in the women's dormitories without having himself cleared first through the guard at the gate and then to be able to enter the dormitory also. Dehydration with the workers was often a very serious problem, between the fact that they were working very hard, also under very heated conditions with the welding equipment and the heavy equipment they were using, as well as the summertime temperatures around here. Ice was first manufactured for the site at an old ice making plant out in the White Bluffs, Hanford area. And that plant was used for a number of years before they built a site plant. Richland's only bank, First Security or Security National, had failed in 1931. Richland had been without a bank and remained without a bank except for the services that Seattle First National Bank provided to the Hanford employees. And that first service was simply a facility handling station, which meant that it cashed checks, transferred money, wired money home, did not provide any kind of other services. Matthias provided a building for the two major religions found at the Hanford Site, the Roman Catholics and the Protestants. Other denominations found themselves borrowing or sharing one of those two church buildings, or utilizing a home, an old church from Hanford, White Bluffs, or Richland, or another old building. This is one of the rare shots, actually, of an Afro-American recreational hall out at Hanford. A small number of Afro-American single women also came west to Hanford. Many of them worked in the Afro-American facilities, either in the mess hall or the recreational facility. Married couples, of course, could only live in the trailer camp if they could get a trailer and live together there. There was one small camp set aside. It had 80 sites that was set aside for Afro-American married couples. As I said, meat rationing was not an issue here. Notice the mechanization. He's actually making rolls. There's your pie dough. It's laid over 4 pie plates that are attached. And a machine then molds the dough to the pie plate. There we go. Some of you who worked here at this time and ate here, of course, know that that's what you did. Raise the pot, raise the pitcher, raise the bowl, and they'll come and refill it for you. Yeah. The people that I admire in this scene are the waitresses. How quickly they move, and the amount they either carry or move around in the carts. This is your box lunch. This is a standalone facility. It was not attached to any one of the mess halls. And an entire facility with its own menus, its own ordering, its own crew who did nothing but make box lunches. There's the circus again. There were a number of families who came out here, and Matthias and others did work very hard to try to provide not only daycare, but also activities for children, recreational activities in the summertime like swimming lessons and things like that. Campfire girls, scouting, Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts were all organized. Saturday matinees, circuses. What is actually, to me, most amazing about this movie is for all of the security and all of the issues of secrecy, this movie is remarkably informative about where Hanford was, what was going on there, some of the construction. Data, you're seeing how many meals were consumed, you're seeing weight, pounds, and quantities of construction materials. And for a time period when security was mandatory and secrecy was the word of the day, there's a lot of information in this movie. Healthcare was extremely important. There were first aid stations scattered throughout the site, physical examinations. In June of 1944, Richland Hospital was completed. Less than a month later, the hospital was renamed Cadlick Hospital in honor of Lieutenant Colonel Harry R. Cadlick. Cadlick was a deputy engineer for the Hanford Site. He was also the first man to die in the hospital. This hospital was a full care facility. There was dental care, there was specialized care for a variety of medical problems. There was a psychiatric ward, there was a pediatric ward and a maternity ward. You all know that Richland had one of the highest birth rates in the nation. And one of the healthiest, too. And they are right. The only other hospital in this area was Our Lady of Lourdes at the time. It was not until the early 1950s that Kennewick acquired their own hospital. Catholic Hospital was open to the employees and their families on the Hanford project. Kennewick residents still had, if they needed hospital care, crossed the old green bridge to Our Lady of Lourdes. And the standing joke with physicians in Kennewick was, how many of their babies were born on the green bridge? Especially at certain times of the day. This is a 1.5-minute scene of surgery. You can close your eyes. I'll tell you when it's over. This is to prove to you how skilled the surgeons were that they brought to the site and how good the medical care was. Oddly enough, though, when Gus Alden Pearson designed the Richland Village and all of the facilities that were to be there, the banks, the grocery stores, the drugstores, the clothing shops, one of the things that did not pass muster with Matthias and DuPont was a funeral home. And so for a number of years, there was no funeral home or funeral services available in Richland Village. For those of you with your eyes closed, the patient is recovered. public health was a very, very important part of the site. It was very important to keep the workers healthy, to control mosquitoes, for example. Public health was also very busy inspecting housing facilities outside of the Richland Village and the Hanford Construction Camp. And there were a number of tent camps and auto courts available for the workers in Pasco, in Kennewick, in Prosser, in Connell, and these were all inspected as often as possible by the public health officers. And some of them indeed were very sad.
Don't laugh, that baby might be in this room right now.
That's right. Visiting nurses and public health officers frequently made visits to the trailer camps. There were a number of married couples here, and the women were as needed in the workforce, so there were a number of daycares. The Red Cross went so far as to provide a playground and daycare at their site so that women who were volunteering with the Red Cross, they could attract more women to the Red Cross by providing a daycare for the volunteers. Any of you recognize yourselves in those pictures? As I said, this movie is amazing. Richland, Hanford, and White Bluffs each had a population of approximately 250 people before the federal government condemned the land. Matthias brought in an architect, Gus Alden Pearson, to design the Richland Village, and that included the homes, what we call the alphabet houses. Some of you probably recognize your homes there. To design the community facilities, the community house, the churches, the hospital, the commercial district. He did not design the prefabs, but he did make arrangements for the layout of the prefabs was part of his work. Everything that you see and know as Richland was designed by Gus Alden Pearson. If the name does not mean anything to you, Pearson was a partner in Spokane for a while with a very famous Northwest architect, Kirtland Cutter, who designed most of the very large and ornate homes that are in the Browns edition of Spokane. Unfortunately, Pearson's other part of his job was to come in and evaluate the 185 existing structures from Richland, Hanford, and White Bluffs, and to make some decisions as to whether those buildings were usable or not. Pearson found only 19 homes and 7 commercial buildings that he felt could be remodeled and reused for for the new Richland Village. Pearson had this to say about Richland, and I'm sorry for those of you who, I apologize for Pearson. He didn't think much of the community of Richland. It's a cluster of stores, small farms and orchards, a limited irrigation system, country lanes. There are no sewers, and plumbing facilities were found in only a few houses. Domestic water came mostly from wells. The houses themselves were of dubious quality. Pearson designed the transient quarters, or what became the Desert Inn. It was the village's only hotel. It had a coffee shop, 114 rooms, meeting facilities, suites, and a spectacular view of the Columbia River, the Rattlesnake Ridge, and the White Bluffs. Pearson did say this: "These views are impressive, for despite the seeming barrenness of this country, sparse in trees, the color of the hills and plateaus is subtle and pervading, full of nuance and seasonal change. The skyscapes and the sunsets rival the finest in the nation." And so he built the Desert Inn to face the river and the bluffs and take advantage of those views.
Is this our section coming up now? I'm Gene Weisskopf with the B Reactor Museum Association, and what we're talking about now is why Hanford was built. Even though it looked like it might have been a summer camp, it really wasn't. All those people were brought here to do one thing and one thing only, and they weren't told what that was. Most 99% of the people who built Hanford had no idea what it was going to be when it was finished. What we're going to look at now are the 100 and 200 areas where the plutonium production took place, the whole reason that Hanford was built. And many of the buildings you'll see are sort of normal structures for heavy industry. A few of them are quite unique to Hanford and brand new at the time and invented for the purpose. A few years before Hanford was built, the idea of atomic power was nothing more than Jules Verne. For example, 6 million square feet of masonite. You all still use masonite. As it turns out, masonite was a key part of the shielding in the reactors. They sandwiched steel and masonite to block the neutrons and